So, I'm a really big fan of the Christopher Nolan Batman films. I guess I'm a fan of Christopher Nolan in general. And I really wanted to do something cool in a follow-up to my Iron Man ambience piece. And I've always really liked the idea of the home base for the hero, the place where they would come back and take off their armor or costume and relax and research villains or just do whatever, work on upgrades. I've always felt like it's put off this vibe of creativity and inspiration and just experimentation, which I thought was great for general ambience pieces, especially combined with the amazing soundtracks in movies like Iron Man or the Dark Knight series and many more. I'm a huge fan of Hans Zimmer too, so that helps. Now, the Batcave in the Christopher Nolan films are not featured very heavily. In Batman Begins, you get a general layout of what is going on. There's the cave, the sort of pool and waterfall, and the subterranean structure from Wayne Manor. It's pretty cool, but there's not a lot going on. It's mainly an experimental place for Bruce Wayne to set up, and you get the sense that he's still building it. Of course, in The Dark Knight, he doesn't have the Batcave. His Batcave is a warehouse that's elsewhere in Gotham City because his mansion is being rebuilt. And so I thought that the optimal choice for a Batcave location would be Wayne Manor in A Dark Knight Rises once it's been rebuilt, and he's been able to incorporate themes and concepts that have built up throughout the three films. It harkens back to the first film because we're obviously back in Wayne Manor in the cave. It references the second film because there's elements of very prominent square geometric shapes and strong lighting accents. And I love the way the third film integrates these two. So for example, we have these large square pieces of marble that emerge out of the water very dramatically. And it's just such a cool realization of the Batcave that I thought would make the perfect place to model. Now, I've built a few things in Maya, but for this, I love Unreal Engine because of how quickly you can prototype and light and render things. And to start off, I wanted to find the best references I could, so I looked at a lot of behind the scenes of the Batman films. At the end of the day, it came down to this particular shot. I loved how you could see most of what was going on in the Batcave. I loved the parallel lines and angles of the geometry on display. And I liked how you could see almost out the end of the Batcave with the waterfall in the background. It gave a real sense of depth and inclusion to most of the elements in this space. So this is my rough starting perspective. And to start, I was like, okay, I wanted to start with these two prominent square features. So obviously in Unreal, starting with the cube and scaling it up to the right size. Now I'm in wireframe mode, so I'm going to switch in unlit just to get a better idea. Now this doesn't match perfectly. I know that these two large cubes are supposed to be a little bit more, touching the corners, but when I was building the perspective, I just really liked how it looked with them a little bit closer together. So there's some artistic license here. So this essentially the bones of this are the two cubes and the lighting fixture above, then the walkway with the stairs, and then the landing here. And here's my camera. This was roughly the angle I wanted, and I just made a sequencer with a camera just to get started. For textures on these pieces, Unreal Engine allows you to use the Megascans library for free. It's a wonderful, wonderful resource, and it's just got an incredible wealth of amazing photoreal looking environments that I'm sure they use on The Mandalorian. I mainly used the black galaxy granite square tiles. I found it gave a really rich, reflective looking marbled inky black color that I liked and that I thought matched the environment really well. So once I had that, I'm in unlit mode here, but I'll go into lit mode to show you what it looked like. So here's my camera perspective. I had a little film grain to add some life to it. Now, you can't really see a ton of what's going on here, and that's because we don't have much in the scene. But already you can see with the lighting I've set up, the reflections, the specularity, the texture, everything looks really, really good with minimal effort. I just had to assign like how big I wanted the tiles to be. And it was a lot of trial and error to get the lights plane just right, but I'll get into that in a minute here. So turning the lights off, again, this was the starting structure for everything. So the next step was to build the cave. In the Epic Games store, there's a great pack called Modular Cliffs that I used. It's a little pricey right now, but even if you don't want to use that, I mean, Quixel Bridge with the Megascans library has some amazing surfaces and models you can use. So with rocks, I'm going to turn that layer on now. It's a little crude and messy, but that's okay. The idea was to get something out the door quick. So the idea was, okay, I want a wall on this side, a wall on this side, and essentially a funnel that acts as the mouth of the cave here, where I'm going to have the waterfall. Now, if I go to my camera position here, it's hard to tell what's happening. There's no sense of depth because the lighting isn't on. The next step was to create a water plane. Now that can be found under basic. You've got planes, and then I just added the lake water texture. And a lot of these assets you can find for free on the Epic Games store. Again, we can't really tell what's happening because the lighting's not on. And I believe all these rock assets are from Quixel Bridge. So it makes it really easy to drag and drop into the environment and just kind of arrange it until you think it looks good. With all the rocks on, I'm just going to touch on a few more things before we get into the final look. So I wanted to build a rain system. So let me turn that on here. So here's what my rain system looks like. It's a basic particle emitter built in Niagara. And it consists of 3 parts. So you've got the material for the rain, the emitter, and then the Niagara system itself. In the material settings, I just set it to a translucent surface with a white color and then a radial component for the opacity. And so that gives it this, basically it's a circle with a gradient on the edges. I mean, pretty basic. And then in the emitter, so here we're in Niagara. This is Unreal Engine's replacement for the Cascade particle emitter system. You essentially tell the engine, here's how long I want the particles to live, here's how strong I want gravity to act on them. You know, if you want them to bounce, if you want them to die upon colliding. And then you build that into the system itself, which is used to populate the world. Now there's a ton of emitter systems here. And it's not very well optimized, and that's essentially because it's a rendered cinematic and I don't have to worry about engine optimization just yet. So if we go into my camera position, and if I turn on the lighting system now, and I go to lit, it's still a little dark, and that was by design because I didn't want the light to be too overpowering. This is a Batcave after all. It's got to be a little dark and anonymous. But to add some volume to the space, I added atmosphere fog and exponential height fog. And so you can already see toggling that on. It gives much more presence and volume to the space, especially in the background. With an exponential height fog, you want to designate where the fog begins. And so that's here in the start distance. You have control over the cutoff and general opacity. And this is all just sort of playing with values until it feels right in relation to things like the rain system and the lighting. Taking a step back, I knew the centerpiece was the most important thing of this scene. So what's on the platform? In Dark Knight Rises, the bat, the flying vehicle, is on this platform here. And this platform is reserved for Bruce Wayne's computer and his other things. But again, creative license. I think the tumbler was just a lot more iconic than the bat, and so I really wanted to go back and use that piece. So I did not build this tumbler. I bought this from CG Trader, which is a great resource for buying 3D models and supporting awesome, amazing artists. And I know this is a light fixture, but I thought it added a really cool bit of the scene to have it plugged into something and plugged into the light, because why not? This is some future tech, and so maybe it also acts as a power source. And then I wanted to have the bat suit, because I had the scene initially without the bat suit. It felt very empty, like it was missing something that tied it together. So this is the bat suit from the second and third films, obviously, because he has his neck upgrade. So just flicking on the light mode, you can see this is using another texture from Quixel Bridge that had a really nice matte surface, but still a little bit of shine. That made it look like something that was carbon fiber or a high quality mesh material. Then I just added a glass case, and this was by really quick and dirty creating well, I experimented with different glass looks. This is a plastic texture that has different functions in it, just to make sure that the light responds correctly to it. I wanted to make sure that as the light passed through it, you could definitely tell that it was reacting properly. So turning on the lights, turning on the fog, this is starting to look right. And again, a lot of these lights, there's a lot of lights in the scene and they're overlapping and it's not very efficient. But again, one of the reasons why I love Unreal Engine is because it allows you to prototype things so quickly and get them out the door, which was important for this project. So I have essentially all point lights in various shapes and sizes. I wanted to make sure the reflections on the water hit just right. The light on this wall, the light in the cave, which is set to a cooler temperature. Most of the lighting work here was to obviously get the light fixture lit properly, light the scene properly, and give a really nice sense of light and shadow and contrast. The last thing I wanted to do was to add a computer in the foreground, again, to add to the depth. And for this, again, more artistic license. I know that there's a specific design to the computer from the films. I wanted something that told the story that didn't distract too much from the centerpiece. So I've just got a few basic screens with a basic keyboard. Then I added some animation to make the typing scroll in real time. Again, to add to the sense that there was work being done here. Even though Bruce had just stepped out, something was happening. Lastly, I added a post-process volume, and here we're able to turn on things like ray tracing, ambient occlusion, motion blur, things that really help sell the piece as being more photoreal. Again, you can see now that we have the lighting turned on that the reflections from the water now behave properly. You can see the nice flowing effect reflected. And it really is as simple as that. Once we zoom out, you can see the full scene here. There's some God rays that I put in. They didn't come across as quite well as I'd hoped because there's a lot of occlusion in the cave, but backing out, you can see the God rays take effect. And the scene is really pretty simple. I mean, I didn't really see a need to build anything beyond what the camera could see. So when we get back into the scene with our camera, I mean, there it is, and all the pieces are there. So once I had the scene rendered out from Unreal, the only thing I wanted to do in After Effects, it was pretty simple. I could have prototyped this in Unreal, but I just knew I could do it so much quicker and more effectively in After Effects, was to put in the waterfall and the bats. With the waterfall, I got something from, I think it was Shutterstock, a really quick waterfall element. I knew I could just comp in, slow down, and make it look the part. And then for the bats, I looked at a lot of different bat assets. Obviously, Shutterstock had some, but they weren't quite fitting, and I knew I wanted something very specific. So I ended up doing an old technique where I took a stock photo of a bat, isolated it just so it was black, then I separated both the wings and the body, and I made a very simple, very dumb-looking animation of the wings going up and down and the body going up and down in response. But the funny thing is that when you do that and you make a pre-comp and you animate it into the shot and you duplicate it several dozen times and turn on motion blur, it actually looks really good. And when I first saw this, I was surprised at how something so simple could actually look really effective if done properly. I wanted to have the bats enter about every, I think, 5 minutes or so. Not too often, but often enough to where you knew that this was still a bat cave. And it was important to me that this felt like a living space, like it wasn't just a screensaver or something, some still image you were looking at, that it felt real. With the sound design, just some very distant, basic waterfall and cave sound effects in the background, because again, with Hans Zimmer's score and the amazing performances done by Christian Bale and the rest of the cast of these films, I wanted the focus to be on that and the storytelling to come through that. So it starts off with the beginning of the first film and Bruce Wayne's journey. And essentially what I wanted to do was combine important character moments with key musical motifs. So it'll have characters asking Bruce Wayne about nightmares, about what he's afraid of, cutting together with the motif of his parents passing away. Then Alfred warning him about the Joker, and then going to the musical motif of the Agent of Chaos. Finally coming back to the powerful Dark Knight theme for Bruce Wayne talking about how he hasn't given everything, not yet. And there you go, that's essentially how I built this space, how I made the Batcave. It was using essentially almost entirely pre-made elements that I just configured in a specific way that felt right to me. And I know that it's not necessarily 100% accurate to the films, but when it's all said and done, this is what spoke to me. And I hope you'd enjoyed it. I hope you got something out of it. And most importantly, I hope it inspired you to make something yourself. One of the most amazing things to me when I watch a film or play a video game or whatever, listen to music, is the feeling of, I want to give other people the feeling this gave me, and I hope that they carry that forward. So thanks for joining me on this, and if you have any questions, please leave them in the comments. Moving forward from here, I'm going to keep working on building environments, building worlds, building stories, and I hope you'll come along for the journey. Obviously, with posting so much of Hans Zimmer's music and Iron Man, I can't monetize the channel, and ads will appear despite that, but I'm very grateful that you're here, and stay tuned for more.